Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Faces of Carlsbad and Channel 23. We're very glad to be here with you. We're here at this beautiful Carlsbad Foundation building due to the nice, friendly feeling that Jim Harrison always, makes us feel when we enter this building. And also Dorothy, who always answers the phone up front in case of an emergency. And we want to thank Intrepid Potash for sponsoring our programs, and we're deeply indebted to them. But anyway, let's go on and tell you what we do on this show, in case you're watching for the first time. We introduce to you people you've never met before, people you might know. They might even be your neighbors. You never know about this show. And today I'm very pleased to introduce a very lovely lady. This is a special lady. This lady works with me on radio, KCCC Radio, and we've been together for how many years now? Almost 2 years.
2 years.
2 years, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm referring to Deanna Taylor, a very famous lady in Carlsbad.
Oh, I'm so famous?
Yes. All right. Now tell me, Deanna, on this show we always try to find out a little background of your grandparents, where they came from originally, and where your parents lived originally, and where you were born. Okay. So let's start with the grandparents.
Well, actually, I'm from an Irish background, and my great-grandparents came from Ireland. Of course, they came over into the United States through, to New York, and a lot of them lived in upstate New York.
Yeah.
Most of them actually lived in Amsterdam, New York.
Oh, I know where that's at, yeah.
Amsterdam, which it used to be where Mohawk carpet used to manufacture, and of course through all of the problems with things going overseas, they're not there anymore, so it's a very small community. And then my father actually came from a Scottish background. I'm not sure actually where his family originated from, but both my parents were actually living in Buffalo, New York when they met each other.
Uh-huh.
And my dad worked for the steel mill, Bethlehem Steel, for years. He was there for 50 years back.
That is a rough business, too.
He started working at Bethlehem Steel at the age of 12 years old.
12 years old?
12 years old. He started there, and he retired at 62. Unfortunately, he passed away almost a month after he retired. But he worked there for 50 years. He started off like a male person, and when he died, he was actually a foreman. He became a foreman. I mean, he worked in the mill itself, directly in the mill. So.
What do you think contributed to your father's early death?
Well, that could probably take the whole show. But an interesting thing happened. The last time I went back to Buffalo, I found out there was a lawsuit going with Bethlehem Steel. A lot of the employees that worked there from 1947 to 1956 were working under bad conditions because of the war. They were making nuclear stuff, and they didn't have any protection.
Oh my goodness.
So, since my dad worked there under those conditions, he actually died from cancer that was caused by the conditions.
Oh my goodness.
But he didn't know it.
They never knew it.
It was a gentleman that realized that a lot of the employees from Bethlehem Steel within that period of time had all kinds of, cancer, lung cancer, pancreatic cancer, and all of that was caused through the working under the conditions that they were under, and they didn't have any protection like they do now.
Yeah, right. Oh,
So,
that's terrible.
That's interesting. So my mom never worked. She actually, she was a cook. Actually, she worked for the VFWs, for the Elks Club. So she was a cook, but she was more of a stay-at-home mom.
Well, she worked hard there.
She worked hard.
Now, did you have any brothers or sisters?
I had 2 brothers. We were called the Irish twins. Do you know what that means, the Irish twins? We were actually just about a year apart. So we were called the Irish twins.
Oh, I see.
And we were just barely a year apart from each other. My oldest brother passed away at the age of 50, so he's been dead
for goodness sakes.
18 years now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. I still have a brother that lives in Buffalo. I have a lot of relatives still back east, and I still have some good friends there. But I've been in Carlsbad now for 30 years.
30 years?
30 years.
Have you gone back to Buffalo to visit a couple
yeah.
times?
Oh, yeah. I go back. Yeah.
It's a
30
nice city.
years.
I've been up there a couple of times, but I haven't spent much time because my dad worked on the Erie Railroad, and it went south of Buffalo
Yeah.
through
Well,
Jamestown.
we actually came a lot from the same kind of backgrounds.
Yeah,
You know, because your dad was railroad.
right.
You know, the Erie Railroad, which actually was a big part of the steel mill too.
Yeah,
'Cause
absolutely.
they had to have the railroad. You know, and I was from the steel mill background.
Yeah, so we're a real
Yeah.
steel. That's what.
Blue collars.
Blue collars
collars,
is right.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, your mother was. She was a very, very interesting lady.
Yeah.
I thought the world of her, and she knew it too.
Well, I brought her here,
Right.
as you know. It was, she has been passed now for 3 years.
Yeah. Oh, has it been that long? Oh my
Yes.
gosh.
And I brought her here about 10 years ago.
Hmm.
From Buffalo, and she lived independent up to maybe the last 2 years of her life, and then I put her in Lansing, and she loved it there. She loved being at Lansing because she got to meet a lot of really good people, and she loved you, Bob.
Well, I loved her too, and every time I'd go in to see her, she was trying to get that baseball game on because she was a New York Met fan.
Oh yes, big Mets.
She was a
Big
loyal Met,
Mets.
and I never mentioned to her that I was a Cleveland Indian fan because I didn't want her to get mad at me.
Yeah. In fact, this is probably weird, but I remember when her last wishes were that she had to be, how some people when you bury them, you put them in their best dresses and their jewelry or whatever. She had to be buried in her Mets hat and her Mets sweatshirt, and she had these little Mets souvenirs that she loved, and I had to make sure I put them in her coffin.
Is that right?
Yep.
Oh my gosh.
Yep, and I got panicked because I couldn't find her Mets sweatshirt, and I thought
Yeah.
if I don't find that, she's going to haunt me.
Oh
So,
dear. But you did find it.
I did find it, and she is buried back in Lancaster, which I was raised actually as a suburb of Buffalo,
Mhm.
and I went to school there, and my dad is buried there, so she's now
Yeah.
back with my dad.
Oh. Well, your mother was a wonderful lady and always had a smile on when I went in to see her.
Yeah.
Always did. Always gave me a big hug.
Yeah.
Made me feel good. And some days I went in there, I didn't feel very happy when I went in, but she always made me happy when I got there.
Yeah.
So anyway, now in your early days, you worked back there too because you were doing something that was quite interesting. Tell our audience
Well,
about
actually,
that.
I actually was a factory worker. I worked in a lot of different factories, but one that you're probably going to talk about is my Fisher Price Toys.
That's right.
I worked in East Aurora with Fisher Price Toys, and this is when Fisher Price was privately owned, and they had the factory in East Aurora, and I worked on the assembly lines,
Mhm.
made a lot of different toys, and I think the one we're going to talk about is that I put the barn door and made it move on the farmhouse, the
Yes.
barn door,
Yeah.
and it made it move. And
And how many people in the world have done that?
Um,
Not
well,
many.
now I think they're made in China. All the Fisher Price toys are made in China,
Mhm.
which is really interesting because Fisher Price used to have a big sign out that said, "Our work is child's play," because we
Yeah,
made these toys.
yeah.
And they would grab a toy off the assembly line and they would give these toys to like daycares, and because that toy could be 20 years old and they would replace that toy. That's how much their quality control
Wow.
was amazing.
Jeez.
But on the assembly line, you had to really, me, and I've always liked to chit-chat, and if I get telling a joke or somebody tells a joke and I laugh, if some of the parts don't get in that toy, then I stop the whole line, and then, me get in trouble, so, yeah.
How long did you work for that?
I worked for Fisher Price Toys probably for 5 years, and when I left Fisher Price Toys, I went to another company, a bigger company called American Optico.
Mhm.
And they manufactured all the optical equipment for ophthalmologist and optometrist in their offices, plus they did a lot of microscopes, all the different levels of microscopes for labs, and they did a lot of hospital equipment. And I worked on that assembly line, and what was great about American Optical is that I worked there for quite a few years, and then they put me through college.
Oh, they did?
Yes.
Oh, boy, that must
I
have...
got to go through college, and I got a degree in public relation and marketing through American Optical. Of course, American Optical has been bought out several times. Now it's a very small, company now because of all the buyouts. But
I might have used some of their equipment when I was in the ordnance department of the Army, because
Well-
I was in the telescope, binocular, and
yeah, you probably did.
binocular.
Yeah. Yeah, for years. In fact, a lot of optometrists and ophthalmologists still have the original seats, headrests, the arms that put the instruments on, the phoropter that, reads, because there's a lot of technology now.
Yeah.
The instrument that they put your chin on and they check to see if you have glaucoma. All that was done by American Optical. A lot of them still have the standard equipment of the American Optical, which I used to build.
Wow.
That's an interesting story about American Optical. If it wasn't for American Optical, I wouldn't be here today.
Is that right?
Mhm.
Fill us in on that.
Well, I was married, as you know, for 28 years to Dr. Taylor, who was the ophthalmologist here.
Mm-hmm.
And he passed away 4 years ago. And he had problems with one of his equipment in his office.
Mm-hmm.
And it was made by American Optical. And at that point, I have already left the factory, and I was in a marketing position in American Optical.
Right, yeah.
And he had called the corporate headquarters, and they had called me and said, we have this doctor in New Mexico that is not happy with his equipment, because when that particular equipment goes down, that's one of his rooms are down, and that means the patient flow gets backed up.
Yeah.
So I have called them to try to reason the fact that we will send him a loaner, and I will personally walk through the equipment to make sure that it's working. So, my job was at stake. So I married Brian to keep him a satisfied customer.
Oh, is that right?
Until I got to Carlsbad.
I'll be darned.
Yeah.
What was your first opinion when you came to Carlsbad? The area, the city?
Well, you got to remember that I was from a very large city, and to move here was really kind of shocking to me. But I'm the type of person that, I realized that it was very small.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really hard for me in the beginning, very hard. I had a hard time making friends, believe it or not.
You're kidding.
I had a hard time making friends.
Man.
And, well, you got to remember is that a lot of people build their friendships through their churches.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you belong to a church, you really do have, immediate friends, because, their churches are very loud.
Yeah.
And, Brian was Jewish, and the synagogue was very small. So it was, because I knew the people from the Jewish congregation. But as far as finding people more my age was really, really hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard for me in the beginning. But, I enjoyed it. We traveled a lot, Bob. We were like you and LaWanda. We did a lot of traveling. And so it took me, I hate to say it took me almost 10 years to really like Carlsbad.
Well,
But now I wouldn't, I have the best friends. In fact, when Brian
Yeah.
retired, he wanted to move. And there was no way. I have wonderful friends, and you and LaWanda are one of them, and,
Yeah.
I have my friend Ingrid and her, I just have some really good friends here. And there'd be no way I'd ever leave Carlsbad, ever.
That's the way I feel.
Yeah.
he wanted to retire and go someplace else.
He wanted to move to Vegas, Las Vegas.
Oh, he did.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
And you know, I had grandchildren here. You know,
Yeah.
Brian had 4 children.
Yeah.
7 of the grandchildren lived here. So I didn't want to leave them because I love being around them.
Mm-hmm.
And and then I have 15 grandchildren,
15 grandchildren. Wow.
but no children.
Yeah.
It's a way to do it.
You remind me of my mother because she was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking in those days 500,000 people, 600,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And when she married my dad, they transferred him to Sterling, Ohio, with a population of 828. What a shock it was for her. 500,000 to 828 people.
Yeah. It's an eye-opener. But you know, like I said, I've been here now 30 years. It's amazing. I've been here 30 years now.
Yeah.
And I do go back, but I just love coming back here. You know, it's growing.
Oh, I'll say
I
it's
truly
growing.
believe that when you go to a community, and I adapt well no matter where I am. I truly believe that you can't make the community. You've got to belong to the community. You can't just sit back and say, "Oh, I don't like it here." Well, you've got to belong to the community. And as you know,
Absolutely.
Bob, I have really belonged to this community. I was at the community theater.
Correct.
I mean, you directed how many plays?
Quite a
Bob
few.
and Lynn.
Yeah.
I mean, Bob and Lynn, Brian and Lynn in them.
Hmm.
And I was always your backhand stage manager
That's right.
with the theater. I became involved with the Red Cross. People I don't know, in the early 80s. I
Yeah.
became an AIDS advocate here and helped, try to educate about AIDS, and actually was able to take care of AIDS patients.
Hmm.
And then after that, oh my gosh, I was with Assistance League.
Yeah, that's true. I
Yeah.
remember that.
Wonderful organization.
Yeah.
What they do for this community. And that's actually where I met a lot of my friends, the women friends, was through Assistance League.
Yeah.
Hard-working women for what they do in this community. With
And they really do.
children.
They really do.
Yes.
That's for
And
sure.
then Wanda Welch and I ventured together, and we became partners, and we've been working with the beautification for 13 years.
And I've been on that committee.
Yeah.
I just observe how busy you two girls are.
Yeah.
And it's amazing what you put together.
Yeah. So you just have to be involved with the community.
Oh, you brought, that's a good point.
Yeah. And that's what I try to do. And I've been fortunate also that I've gotten a lot of wonderful rewards, through the efforts of what I do.
Hmm.
I would say I've got Elks of the Year awards, Citizen of the Year. I've gotten character counts, and all these other really nice awards.
Well, that makes you feel pretty good when you do something and you're appreciated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the big thing happened. 2 years ago, I was on radio with a very fine gentleman,
Uh-huh.
but he had enough,
Uh-huh.
and he decided to quit. And lo and behold, out of the sky came a vision. And the vision was you.
Yeah.
And I said, would you like to be my partner on radio? And
Yeah.
you didn't hesitate. You
Yeah.
said, no, it'd be wonderful.
Yeah. It's been fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like a new person. Thank you.
I just, want the public to know that how much I love trivia on KCCC.
And that's the one thing we do out there that
Yeah.
I always get a kick. I always look and I say, well, I've got my trivia book today. And immediately Deanna looks up at the ceiling and said, oh my goodness. And she,
I said, there must be things we can talk about. There must be things we can talk about.
well, we've been working together now for nearly 2 years, isn't it?
On KCCC.
Yeah, on radio.
And then, of course, in the
In the theater, we go back many
Gosh,
years.
I think the theater, we've been, oh my gosh, over 20 years.
Oh, 20 years at the theater.
And then
Absolutely.
I came really involved with the theater. I was president for a few years, and I was
Yeah.
on the board and stuff like that. So, yeah. And I still help your wife when I can.
She depends on you. You don't realize how much she depends on you. No,
But I
she
like
really.
the backstage.
Yeah, I tried to get you out on the front so you'd be an actress, but you said no, you didn't prefer that. You wanted to be behind the scenes. But you are a good organizer. I noticed that with you in this theater, that you organize things very well. You don't have to worry about where things are, except when I directed, you know, a couple of times I got irritated, and it was my fault for getting, I get irritated about everything.
You know, organization in the backstage is very important, especially, you know, with all the props.
Yeah.
You know, and because if those props aren't where they are supposed to be, it can be hair-raising in the back.
And I came out a couple times in a flurry, a fury, actually.
Yeah.
And you looked at me and said, "It's not my fault.
Yeah.
If you can't find it, it's not my fault." I thought, oh, women, I would grab my hair and walk off.
I know.
So anyway, but we've had fun in it. But you're right. Working in the theater has been quite an experience for, I think, for both of
And
us.
I've met a lot of good friends there, you know, and that's what I'm saying. If you come to this community, you know, and if you don't get involved with the community, then you're going to sit at home and not be happy.
Yeah.
You know, because, and you'll blame the city or Carlsbad because there's nothing to do. You really have to be involved.
How many times have we been, say, we've gone up to the theater in Artesia,
Yes.
and we're driving around here in town,
Yes.
and we look at each other and say, people say there's nothing to do in Carlsbad. There's a lot to do in Carlsbad.
There is a lot to do.
Just volunteer.
Yeah.
It's absolutely great. Well, what's in the future for Deanna? Trip-wise, where
Well, actually, it's interesting. I did want to tell you about, you know, when Brian passed away, excuse me, 4 years ago, you know, that door really shut on me, you know,
sure.
because his whole inspiration was what brought me to Carlsbad, and actually he's the one that pushed me, besides Wanda, you know, doing things and getting into the public. You know, Brian used to have a joke and say, when I first came to Carlsbad, because I was one of his third or fourth wives or whatever, they used to say, "Who's that girl with Dr. Taylor?" And then after a few years, his saying was, "Who's that guy with Deanna?"
I love it. I love it.
So, and that's what you do, you know.
Yeah.
But when that door shut, when I lost Brian, that truly believe that when that door shut, you know, people say another door will open.
Yeah.
And another door has opened for me, and I now have John Tully in my life.
Yeah, and John was a former student of mine.
Yes.
And a very good student.
Yes.
Well, Deanna, you've made this whole interview very, very interesting, and it's like very relaxing for both of us because we work together on radio twice a week.
I know.
Yeah. The Deanna and Bob Show.
Yeah.
My gosh. Well, anyway, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I know that you didn't want to get on television.
Oh, I hate to be on television. I'm sorry.
But you
Even
did.
though I'm always interviewed, Guy catches me all the time at functions.
Yes.
And he grabs me to interview. So.
But you always look good on TV.
Oh.
I always holler at Luana. I say, "Hey, guess who's on TV?" And it was you. All right, listen, thanks a million for being here.
Oh, my pleasure.
Same here, Deanna. And on behalf of all of us here on Channel 23, I can only say goodbye and good luck. How about that?